Arad, the city you love easily, said an interwar publication. Our journey through the interwar Arad begins at the railway station. It was built in the secession style, between 1909 and 1912, according to the plans of the Hungarian architect Faf Ferenc, and was inaugurated in 1912. The city of Arad was connected with Europe by rail transport, as early as July 1858. In 1930, Arad's public transport network used buses, numbered 16 lines and carried 4.75 million passengers annually. In front of the station were waiting buses and taxis that provided passenger transport to the city center. Continuing the journey to the city center, we arrive in front of the building of the Apprentice Dormitory, built in the interwar period according to the plans of the architect Tash Kuchayoli. Next comes the lake at the forest, on the shore of which stood an imposing building, and on its waves were pleasure boats. This way we arrive in the Vineyard Square. This is where the building of the CFR Regional Directorate is distinguished, Arad being an important railway hub. Until 1923 the city hosted the headquarters of the CFR Regional Directorate. In the square we also find the building of the railway station Arad Vineyard. This electrified railway, the first on the territory of Romania, provided the connection of Arad with the towns of the Mureș Valley, Gairuc, and Radna, as well as with the Pancata town, since 1906 and continuing the entire interwar period. The central avenues are not only a deployment of tall commercial buildings, but also of private dwellings, belonging to intellectuals and nobility, with the shelter of a very active commercial life and with the window of a culture full of confidence in itself and in its national mission conquering. Wrote Nicolae Iorga in 1923 following his visit to Arad. Moving towards the center of Arad we distinguish the Red Church, a Lutheran evangelical church that was erected in 1906 on the central boulevard of Arad. As you enter the city from the train station, Ferdinand Avenue impresses you with its scale, its bark of trees and flowers that stretch to the heart of the city. And so we end up in the Town Hall Square, located in the center of the Great Boulevard. In the central square, opposite the City Hall building, were erected the buildings of Victoria Bank and the Arad Senate Agricultural Storage House, two of the major banks operating in the city. The city center impresses with its public buildings, including the City Hall building. Its sober style and its high tower reminds of the council houses of the German municipalities. A Furman interwar booklet. The City Hall building was completed in 1875 in a neo-Renaissance style according to the plans of the architect Ledner Odin and under the supervision of the Francis Pecker from Arad. The edifice was inaugurated in 1876. During the interwar period, a carriage and taxi station operated in front of the town hall. The central square is bordered by the Senate Palace, an imposing building inaugurated in 1894 by the United Railway Society Arad Senate SA, following the plan of Budapest's architect Mikos Ybl and locally adapted by the architect Lajos Gyerezek of Arad. From the boulevard, taking a few steps towards the east, you will see the most picturesque part of Arad, the neat shore of Mureș River, which with its rich waters, gives you the appearance of a spa town. Arad is located on the lower course of Mureș, in the western plain. The population of the municipality numbered just over 77,000 in the interwar period, the city being expanding, in 1941 reaching 86,674 inhabitants. The building of the Palace of Justice located on the banks of the Mureș, built in the eclectic style, was commissioned in 1892. The imposing building of the Cultural Palace with its high Corinthian columns, with its surrounding garden of shrubs and flowers with rich pinacoteca and prehistoric collection, with the pompous conference hall and concerts with the Xenopole Library, given to Arad from the will of the great historian, gives you the impression of an authentic Western city. The Mureș River was home to water sports. Rowing was practiced by many athletes. The Arad Strand, located on Mureș, was described by interwar contemporaries as a sea beach on the banks of a river at the saddles. What deserves all the admiration, not so much by style, which suffers from exaggerations, always upsetting, sometimes ridiculous, of a Hungarian secession, of German origin, but passed by Vienna of the first counterfeiting, is the cultural palace, raised by the commune after the exhortation and under the direction of a local society. Few halls in Romania have the proportions, elegance, and acoustics of the one where we spoke one evening. Mentions Jurga in 1923. The painting museum comprises canvases sent from Budapest, as France sends from Paris, endowed for provincial museums. The historical painting of large proportions, covering an entire wall, is indeed remarkable, by the care of the costumes and the science of grouping. The society that founded the cultural palace had before it a complete plan of activity. Thus he secured by the magnanimous donation of a noble family, a library of 18th century French publications as few countries have it besides France. Complete Jurga. Children's Hospital Prince Mircea, Surgical Pavilion. Arriving at Arad by train in the evening, Nicola Jurga, noted in the travel notes, the long street that starts at the station is utterly great, worthy of any modern capital, like a piece of the Viennese ring. Two alleys separated by a wide space bear only first-hand buildings, among which the state has sown stately palaces. I also see a church whose facade is occupied by giant pillars. The next day, I finally understand what this great Arad is. The street I came from the station is the boulevard, which includes the town hall, the Roman Catholic Church, the largest hotels and a few important trade buildings. By day, he shows himself a little less brilliant, but still imposes a lot, both by the beauty of the walls and in particular, by its special breadth. Those who planned and supervised the composition of this great artery of life were undoubtedly good people. Moving along the boulevard, we find on the right side the Grand Hotel Central with the Arad branch of the Bank Marmorosh Blank on the ground floor. This bank, however, went bankrupt as a result of the economic crisis between 1929 and 1933. The city is quite beautiful in his coat of trees and flowers. In summer, the streets have wonderful views like Ferdinand Avenue and Queen Mary. Stately buildings like the Town Hall and the Cultural Palace are remarkable. In a catalogue published in 1925 in Bucharest, the Arad industry was described, given the data from 1923 as follows: industry, highly developed. There are numerous and important fabrics, automobiles, air gas bulbs, biscuits, candy, brick and tile, pulp, chocolate, distilleries, paper, footwear, construction wood, candles, sausages, machinery, furniture, mills, flour factories, motors, mirrors, poteries, vinegar, oxygen, dolls, parquet floors, brushes, leather, postage, chemicals, cosmetics, soap, spirits, mechanical joiners, tannin, carriages, knitwear, electrical plant for city lighting, wagons, and various other smaller industries. Rarely have I seen so much first-class merchandise deployed on the two sides of the same street. Prices are exactly marked next to each challenge, and they do not seem exaggerated to me. And the bookstore proudly displays the products, old or all new, of newspapers that do not rest, complete the famous interwar historian and politician. In 1932, Baron Ludovic Androni, Arad's most important trader, said, "Today, when a large part of the freight traffic takes place by trucks, the roads have a very high significance in economic life, and their bad state has an adverse influence on the commercial movement of the city." Public transport was provided by trams drawn by the locomotive until 1925 on the central route. Later, Renault and Berliet buses were used to transport people on the central boulevard of Arad. The Arad people were meeting for a beer in the city center, in front of the theater. Next to the theater is the White Cross Hotel, the oldest hotel in the city, formerly a post office for carriages in the 19th century. taxi cars had a stop in the city center in front of the theater. On the central thoroughfare of Arad in the 1930s, apart from pedestrian travel, people were riding bicycles, carriages, cars and buses. The Arad Theatre was built between 1872 to 1874 in neoclassical style. Bohus Palace, erected at the end of the 19th century, housed the headquarters of the Romanian bank branch during the interwar period. "Don't cheat on your man," a slogan of sexual discrimination, was displayed in the center of Arad. The interwar winter covered the center of Arad in white. After 1929, the buses took the place of trams towed by the locomotive in public transport in Arad. The tram towed by the locomotive appeared again in Arad in the 1940s, the carriages being transferred from Odessa and repaired at the Astra plants in Arad. The people of Arad walked in the center of the city even in the rain. The minority church in the city center was erected, replacing the old church in 1903, according to the plans of the architect Milan Tabakavich. Located near the western border of Romania, during the interwar period Arad was a cosmopolitan, multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-faith city, 39.35% of the inhabitants being Romanians, 38.84% Hungarians, and 7.94% Germans. Serbs, Croats and Slovenians accounted for 1.78%, Czechs, Slovaks and Croats 1.4%, and Jews accounted for 9.14% of the city's population. From a confessional point of view, Roman Catholics represented 38.5% in Arad, while the Orthodox had 33.8%, the Calvin Reformed 9.9%, the Greek Catholics 4%, the Evangelicals 2.6% and the Mosaics 2.4%. Eminescu Street, formerly Deoc Ferenc, was a commercial, service and banking thoroughfare with many shops and business offices. Pharmacies sold toothpaste, Nivea cream, and aspirin, for which they also had visual advertisements. On the central boulevard were tailors, locksmiths and shoe shops. The theater housed a warehouse of made-up clothes. The theater market, Economie and Cu, was home to Arad's large agri-food market. In 1929, Arad was visited by Lizel Goldarbeiter Miss Universe, originally from Austria, and Magda Dimitrescu, Miss Romania. The ladies of Arad were generally dedicated to domestic activities. Across the street from the synagogue, next to the house with the lock, there was a fish market. Although taxi cars had appeared, the carriages were still in use. Crossing the bridge over the Mureș, in front of the traveler appears the imposing building of the Moses Nicora High School, inaugurated in 1873, built in Neo-Renaissance style, according to the plans of the architect Diescher Joseph and under the direct supervision of the architect Jirazek. The high school was built on the site of the ancient Orthodox Cathedral of Arad. The pompous entrance to Moses Nicora High School, built from the money of a Romanian foundation, reminds you of a higher school rather than a high school, states an interwar publication. The Church of the Orthodox Cathedral of Arad was built between 1861 and 1865 on a marshy land. In front of the church will move during the interwar period the agri-food market of Arad. The most famous restaurants of the interwar Arad were Lido and Boulevard. The current puppet theater building was home to the Cultural House of Industrialists during the interwar period. Next to the casino building, built in neo-Baroque style and completed in 1872, during the interwar period the Arad people could play tennis in the summer, and in winter they could practice skating. The economic crisis between 1929 and 1933 was well overcome in Arad. The president of Victoria Bank in Arad wrote in 1938, "The market of Arad was conservative and solid, economic life took place in a relatively temperate atmosphere, and in business reigned and reigns caution and prudence. Even in the age of disjunctive and crises when events stronger than banking institutions shook the banking market to the ground, the population of Arad kept its healthy calmness that has characterized it at all times." However, the domestic and international political situation that will lead to the outbreak of World War II will also affect Arad's economic life. Because of external events, many industrialists in Arad have been interested in ways to move within the country. Loans granted to Arad were restricted and new loans for Arad could not be obtained, especially in September and October. As a final result, we see a reduction in industrial production, although the production of armaments increased, wrote to the head of the Arad Industrial Inspectorate in 1939. The outbreak of the Second World War ended the interwar period, with Arad mainly affected by the enlistment of many Arad people in the belligerent armies, but mainly because of the bombing that would affect the Arad's industrial and civilian sites.